I finally finished Crimson Desert. And after playing the game for over 200 hours, I gotta come clean about something. For the first half of the game, I was convinced that the story was practically non-existent. Just a generic excuse to justify an open-world combat sandbox. But after ending the game, it turns out I was dead wrong. You probably already know about the gameplay elements, the exploration, the combat, the ungodly amount of content packed into this game, paired with the stuff the devs added later on with patches. But what you didn't know is that Crimson Desert actually has some genuinely insane and well thought out lore. The writers just did everything humanly possible to make sure you never actually see it. So in this video, I want to focus mainly on the story of this game, what are some of the problems with it, and how I think they could have fixed it. And of course, it goes without saying, there will be some heavy spoilers, so yeah, be warned. Now, in my opinion, one of the biggest reasons the story is told so badly comes down to one thing: the quest design. So let's start there. The game opens up with a battle where the Blackbeards attack the Greymanes and Kliff is killed right at the start, with Muradin slitting his throat and pushing him off a cliff. In the next scene, Kliff finds himself in a mysterious place where he does a bunch of platforming before finally waking up in the real world again. Now that's a really intriguing opening. It leaves the players with many questions. How did Kliff survive those type of injuries? What was the mysterious place he was in? But right after that banger of a start, the game totally forgets about all of it for like a good 6 hours or so and just starts giving you these really mundane objectives like explore this tavern, arm wrestle this soldier, give coin to this beggar who just hands you a key and magically disappears. Open the hatch, drop down and there's a woman tied up inside you have to rescue, who hands you a letter and magically disappears too. Then the game tells you to save a cat, then help a couple clean their chimney, and Kliff basically does all these so-called acts of kindness for hours before things start to get remotely serious. Why is Kliff helping these random people instead of desperately looking for the Greymanes? Well, no idea. And this is a recurring problem throughout the game. Instead of relying on any sort of organic inciting incident to direct Kliff into the right direction, the game just kind of sort of tells you what you need to do next without any real explanation. After the 6 hours long slogfest, the game finally starts focusing on gathering and rebuilding the Greymanes for the grand objective of reclaiming their homeland, which is now overrun by the Blackbears. In those quests, the game keeps pushing you to help your comrades, especially Jan, just to introduce you to new mechanics. But once again, there's no real reason for you to go and help Jan again and again, and it honestly just gets tiring and really annoying. Like, that's definitely not the way to do it. In fact, while doing these missions, all I could think of was how RDR2 did it. In that game, nearly all of Arthur's action had a reason to them. For example, when he and Charles have to go hunting in Chapter 1, it's a clever way of devs introducing you to the game's in-depth hunting mechanics, but there's a weight to it. The gang was starving, which was communicated with some really good dialogue, Charles' hand was injured, and all that acted as an actual believable reason for Arthur to hunt deer. It wasn't like a quest objective listed at the side of the screen telling you to go hunt 2 deer, because that just makes the quest feel more like a chore instead. And no matter how much I love Crimson Desert, it is true that at some points in the game I really felt extreme exhaustion, because instead of relying on actual story beats, the game was just like, yeah, this Master Yoda from Temu prepared some trials for you, go fight these overpowered bosses for no actual reason. But despite all the shortcomings, the story still managed to get its hooks in me, and by the end of the game, I was left with a ton of questions like, who's Hexa Marie? Why is she obsessed with Kliff? Why is Kliff dull as a rock? Who is Goin? What happened to Caliburn and Muradin at the end of the game? And finally, what the f is Umbra? Unfortunately though, the game never really answered anything. So I started digging online, and in my desperation to find answers, I even ended up visiting Reddit, where I actually found a deep dive explanation about everything thanks to this guy. And reading through all that genuinely blew my mind, because all the explanation is there. It's all just hidden away in books in the Axiom archive. Oh, and they're locked as well. To unlock these books, you have to complete all the 40-something Skybridge puzzles after ending the game, and that's just plain stupid. I mean, I spent 200 hours yes-manning all the NPCs across the continent of Paiwa, looking at all the memory fragments I could find, only to discover that the actual plot of the game was locked in some books I didn't even know existed. So let's look at the actual story of the game, because while it seems like a generic story about a superhero saving the world from evil, it's nothing like that. This in fact is a story about a weapon being forged to stop the end of the world. Let's start with the Crimson Desert itself, because it's connected directly to the main antagonist of the game. At the very end of the game, during the epilogue, Kliff goes to Warnia and meets Sebastian, who, to be very honest, I didn't even remember at that point, but he's the same guy who rescued Kliff at the very start. He tells Kliff that the desert got its crimson appearance and the name from generations of wars and bloodshed staining the land, giving it that distinctive rusty red look. This is important to understand because those years of non-stop violence, human greed, malice, and hatred are what corrupted the pure power of the Abyss, and that corruption gave birth to an entity named Umbra. This is the Avengers level threat that Kliff is actually up against. Caliburn and Murden are kinda like the puppets of Umbra and nothing more. Now at the start, the Guardians of the Abyss, Illustin and the White Crow, tried to take Umbra down, but they failed. And here's where things get crazy. The very first entry states, the time leap allowed us to escape Umbra, yet it changed nothing. Umbra will surely arrive in this era once more. All we can do is hope to find the one who can alter this seemingly absolute fate. Basically, when the Guardians fail to stop Umbra, they reverse time. In fact, the 107 entries in these books represent the failed time loops, which means they kept rewinding time again and again, essentially trapping the world of Pyrell in a time loop. Now, to be honest, I'm a sucker for time travel stuff. I still dearly love the Prince of Persia Sands of Time trilogy, and not gonna lie, I really wish they also get faithful remakes. So this time loop reveal alone had me sold, but anyways. The second entry states, Umbra managed to devour a fragment of White Crow. Her uncorrupted half is still alive and still aids us, but the fractured essence of her disappeared into the land below. So by the third time loop, it was clear to them that they themselves cannot overcome this threat, and that's why they needed someone else to do it. They felt Umbra's presence to be more prominent near the Musket of Nemesis, so they decided to search for their champion in the region of Payloon, a land where the power of nature remains stronger. In the fourth time loop, they finally found Kliff, and the entry states, at last, we found the one we sought, an unwavering spirit with immense potential. Surely he is the one to accomplish this task. He is not perfect, but that is of no concern. We shall guide him. In the next cycle, they sought aid of the Shais, since they are also very close to nature, and this explains how Kliff got his force bomb ability, but of course that alone wasn't enough. In the 7th and 8th time loops, they tried reaching Kliff directly, trying to explain the situation and giving him powers like the Axiom Force and the Crow Wings, but he either ignored them or just refused to accept the abyssal powers. So the Guardians figured out that if they want him to cooperate, they have to just nudge him into the right direction. And this is what best explains why the game has this weird, dissonant narrative design. The devs tried to make it all seem like it was Kliff's destiny which was being manipulated by the Guardians. Like, for example, when Kliff just randomly stumbles upon an injured Blackstar. In the archives it stated that, I sought aid from Blackstar, the dragon that roams the boundaries of the world. The creature thrashed wildly with him upon its back, seemingly most displeased. So it only makes sense that the Guardians deliberately created events that hurt Blackstar and led Kliff to it so he can help the poor creature and earn its loyalty, which he failed to do in the previous time loops. The archives also hold information about the witches as well. The 4 witches on the continent that require your help with the sanctums, the 2 witches from the east who also have the ability to meddle with time, and who also save Kliff when Caliburn pulls him into the past. All these witches were summoned by the Guardians to aid Kliff on his journey. However, there's one witch they didn't summon. Remember the fragment of the White Crow that Umbra devoured? Well, that part of her became corrupted and turned into a witch called Hexamarie. This witch is like the distorted, evil version of the White Crow, and because of that she inherited White Crow's affection for Kliff as well. But it's turned into this weird motherly obsession where she wants to adopt him as her son. In the archives it's also mentioned that her appearance is partly the reason why Master Do's trials exist. This also shows that while the time rewinding trick works to some extent, it doesn't fully reset the Abyss itself. In the books it's also hinted that it's not just the Guardians that are learning from the failed time loops. Umbra too learns from all the failed time loops as well, and basically keeps growing stronger after every reset, deploying different tactics like opening more Abyss gates in the world down below, and choosing its own avatar in the form of Caliburn. Now here I have some complaints about how the game actually handles all this, especially Hexamarie, but more on that in just a bit. The archives also cover the role of Greymanes in Kliff's story and how they impact everything else. In the earlier loops, the Greymane leader, Jian, never died, but that made Kliff way too comfortable and he never really left home and hence failed. In the next time loop, they tried pushing him to Murden's side, but it was a mistake because that made Kliff sink into the darkness himself. So it's safe to say that Jian's death and the Greymane massacre was actually orchestrated by the Guardians themselves. But it doesn't end there. They had to plan very carefully which Greymanes need to die and which ones should survive, and it's a shame that Jan had to be one of the survivors, but anyhow. In the 45th cycle, they couldn't control the massacre and all the Greymanes ended up dying. Kliff had no one left to care about, so he pressed forward alone and adopted the name, you guessed it, Goyen. In the very next cycle, they created Goyen again, only this time he used the abyssal powers for his own personal gain and fell into the darkness, trapped within Umbra, wandering the void, nor living nor dead. And that's why Goyen has this weird shard of Umbra attached to his armor, which is a pretty neat little detail, by the way. Now, I'm not sure, but according to my understanding, they accidentally kept creating Goyens over and over again, until the 99th cycle where they finally convinced him to guide his younger spirit. So the reason why Goyen felt so damn familiar is because he is Kliff himself from the previous time loops. It's an actually insane idea and I absolutely love it, but it's a real shame that it was just one boss fight, and it all feels like wasted potential, but more on this later too. Now the archives also explain why Kliff has a personality of a paper plate. Around the 60th time loop, in their desperation, they even started tweaking Kliff's emotions. First, they tried giving him confidence so he might follow the path designed for him. However, driven by his excessive competitive nature, he ultimately failed. Then they tried to make him more sensitive, but he became overly emotional and distressed and failed again. In the next cycle, they stripped him of his fears, so naturally he became reckless and blindly charged into fights against mightier beings and died. Which, let's be honest, we all still did anyway. Then they heightened his sense of responsibility, but he just turned into a medieval Batman wandering the world trying to eliminate any threat he came across, which once again is exactly what 90% of the players have been doing in this game. So in cycle 66, they just gave up. Every emotion seems to lead him somewhere unintended, straying far from our desired direction. With only a few chances remaining, we've decided to extract his emotions entirely. And that, my friend, is the reason why Kliff reacts with a or a yes to some of the most crazy shit going on around him. Now the thing is, all this is actually pretty solid backstory and lore, and it gives us some much needed context, but the question then becomes, does all this exposition suddenly turn this into a 10 out of 10 story? I don't think so, and here's why. Right off the bat, let's start with Kliff's emotions. What absolutely blew my mind is that in the very first trailer, the few scenes they showed of Kliff, the guy had an actual personality. He appeared to be more hot-headed, more selfish, more mean. Like, dude, this version of Kliff would have punched Jan's teeth out the first time he got into trouble. I have no idea why did they pivot away from that. In fact, I think it would have been a lot more interesting if the Guardians had to deal with this version of Kliff. Then there's the huge wasted potential in the form of side characters like Goyen and Hexamarie. These characters are actually central to the plot and personal to Kliff himself, but they're just treated as a checklist of boss fights and that's it. Like, these characters literally just appear only once throughout the entire game. Hexamarie is described to have an obsession with Kliff. During the boss fight with the Crowcaller, the dude literally keeps on whining about how Mother loved Kliff's more and all that, yet Hexamarie never even tries to reach Kliff herself. And I think since she also had a connection with Umbra, she should have been the main antagonist of the game at the very least, and her presence should have felt more throughout the game. It should have been her who corrupts people like Caliburn and Muradin to do her bidding because she's a witch after all and should do more witchy things. Then there's Goyen. He was appointed by the Guardians to guide his younger self, so he should have also appeared more throughout the game, guiding you like, I don't know, Altair guided Ezio in Assassin's Creed Revelations. As a matter of fact, I think instead of these painful investigation quests that feel more like multiple choice questions or these stupid tutorial missions, they should have had some sort of flashback missions or glitches, you know, something like the bleeding effect where Kliff would actually see his past lives. Like, just imagine the fight with Goyen, where Kliff had already seen him in his visions, and after the boss fight ends in a stalemate, Kliff is like, who the hell are you? And Goyen is like, I'm you if you fail to stop us coming. That could have been a mind-blowing pivotal moment in the game. This would also give Kliff some real character growth as well. Like, he could have started out as this brash, reckless and angry dude, but by the end of the game, he could have grown into a wiser and better version of himself. One more thing I didn't really like is how they handle Umbra itself. First off, it just appears out of nowhere at the very end of the game. And once this god tier entity arrives, all Kliff needs to do is shoot some fireballs at it and then force palm it like 2 times to kill it. It especially becomes frustratingly stupid when the lore entries explain that Umbra, this all-powerful being, actually learns from the failed attempts and continues to grow stronger. When you're setting up such a high-level world-ending threat, the main goal should be to stop it from even appearing in the first place. Like, the plan should have been to stop Caliburn and Muradin from opening a portal or something like that. By keeping Umbra as a looming world-ending threat instead of just another boss fight, the confrontation against both Caliburn and Muradin would be much more meaningful, and that would make the ending a lot more impactful and personal as well. Because right now the entirety of the game is basically Kliff chasing Muirton and then chasing Caliburn, but right at the end, they just killed both of these guys off screen and all of a sudden Kliff's fighting Umbra. Now even if you put all these suggested changes aside and accept the story for what it actually is, yes, it's a solid 6-7 out of 10 story. The point, however, is that the game should have explained at least 80% of the stuff during the playthrough and just left 20% of the heavy lifting for the XM archives. And I think the best way to do that would have been actually to drip feed all of this lore throughout the game, through quests, or even better, through exploration. Crimson Desert gives you a massive sense of wonder at the start. However, the problem is, every white question mark on the map is just another Abyss Nexus for fast travel, an Abyss Crescent that rewards you with an Abyss artifact, or some environmental puzzle that once again gives you the same Abyss artifact, which is only used for upgrading. In my opinion, the puzzles should have offered just a bit more, especially the Abyss ones, because they are a huge missed opportunity. The game has over 40 Abyss Sky Bridges that need to be aligned, and instead of just giving you another artifact, upon completion the game should have triggered some sort of cutscene or a glitch event that takes Kliff back to one of the previous timelines. This would have been a great way to dump exposition and even incentivize players who want to know more about the backstory to complete those puzzles. Because right now, after putting 200 hours into this game and having solved like 30-ish Abyss puzzles, I simply don't want to do any more of them. Now to be honest, all this would have never been a big deal for me. But after reading through the archives, what really disappointed me was the fact that they already had done all the heavy lifting. The entire framework for a great story was already there. The lore, the acting performances, the high quality motion captured cutscenes, the seamless transitions between those cutscenes and gameplay. The game had everything it takes to tell a great story. They simply couldn't do it. But still, credits where credits due, this was their very first single player game, and I hope they've learned from their mistakes, and if they ever make a sequel, I really hope they nail the story as well. Because in my opinion, this is a very interesting world they have created, and all it needs is some compelling characters and a good story. But anyways, I'll leave you at that. Do share your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think about all this? Does the lore actually improve the story, or is it still just mid? Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you found this video valuable. Also hit that hype button, share the video with your friends. I'd really appreciate the support. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.